Good morning to all stakeholders. We are joined by some of the UN agencies who are associated with the process and some of the different elements that make the WSIS process complete, like the WSIS action lines, the partnership on measuring ICT for development, bridging the standards gap, the regional connections, and we will hear from the different representatives today. I would like to first start with our focal point from e-business, which is also co-implemented by UNCTAD, ITC and UPU. Vilidiana, you spoke about your e-business, e-trade for women. Can you please tell us a bit more about what you're doing there and how is it linked to the WSIS process? Over to you.
Thank you, Gitanjali. Indeed, this year the e-business action line focused on bridging the gender gap. We focused on women in e-business, and a clear trend came up, which is that women are lagging behind in the digital economy, and the digital economy in general is usually male-dominated. We need to bring more women entrepreneurs to the table so that they can take advantage of the digital economy. And if you allow me, I'd like to touch upon three key aspects that came out of the conversation. First, we need to boost women's skills in the digital space, and that starts from a young age to later on, while they're already in the workforce. The second is access to finance. The women digital entrepreneurs we heard and we work with all tell us that it is more difficult for them to raise funding to scale and grow their businesses. So that's another area where we can do better. And the last one, which is often neglected or maybe undermined, is the fact that we need more role models, more women in leadership position who can inspire others and who can bring the voice of women to the table. And this is what we've been doing here at the WSIS this year.
Thank you very much. Of course, digital gender inclusion is one of our key priorities within the WSIS process. All the WSIS action lines are striving towards that. And even at the WSIS forum, we tend to achieve 50-50 gender balance and gender participation. So thank you very much for your efforts. I'd like to move on to Mr. Preetham Malur, who is implementing WSIS action line C5, cybersecurity. So Preetham, what were the key trends you noticed this time? We heard several sessions talk about cybersecurity. It's really the essence that cuts across the different action lines. So what are your key takeaways?
Yeah, thank you, Gitanjali. So this year, along with the conversation on cyber threats that we've been hearing over the years at the WSIS forum and other places, we noticed that there's a lot of conversation on attacks on fundamental infrastructure such as subsea cables, for example. There's conversation on risk to satellite communications, and here it's quite interesting because we've noticed that the topic of space has reached a tipping point with new actors in there, new services being offered, broadband services obviously being offered through LEO GEO satellites, but also universal IoT coverage, which is becoming a reality thanks to satellite communications. We are also obviously hearing a lot about new and emerging technologies such as AI, with ChatGPT-4 being an epicenter of the conversation. And the metaverse, these technologies offer a lot of opportunities, but also bring in some challenges. So this is what we are seeing, and generally we are, seeing a more holistic conversation on digital resilience because of all these different aspects coming together. And even in our action line meeting at the WSIS forum, we had C2 and C5 come together. That's primarily because of this reason. Thank you, Gitanjali.
Thank you, Preetham. Of course, yes, space as an enabler of sustainable development was a theme we heard running across. And of course, ChatGPT, most of the leaders who had come here, they joked that their speeches were written by ChatGPT. But like you said, the challenges were also highlighted. So of course, with every new trend is a challenge of cybersecurity, which we are looking at it in an inclusive manner. Thank you very much, Preetham. I'd now like to move on to Davide, who is the WSIS focal point at UNESCO. So Davide, UNESCO implements several action lines, and really you are the knowledge societies component of WSIS. So could you please bring in some of your thoughts, the key trends that run across your action lines?
Thank you, Gitanjali. Yes, I think these are very interesting times. So we have seen, the in the wave of the recovery from the COVID pandemic, we have seen now the focus on the effects that the digital has brought to the stage in many ways, including, for example, education, following the Transforming Education Summit of last year. And we have seen here that now the focus is very much on the implementation, how this can be, how this is implemented, how this is done in locally for bringing this transformation actually in practice, because in the emergency mode, let's say, these things are implemented quickly, so now we need to make it more systemic and make the change. So one takeaway from these conversations that we had here, not only on education but in many other action lines, is about digital transformation. I think the handling of the management of change, management of change is probably the barrier that still keeps us, far from reaching some of our goals, and the effect also of digital transformation. So we have. We heard about the difficulties, for example, in gender gaps, and for example, the effect of particularly some technologies like AI on the working lives of women, for example, is one thing that UNESCO has been highlighting as well. But also the challenges, the many challenges of the technologies that are bringing, as Pritam was mentioning, and how this necessitates attention to ensure that actually there is a dialogue between public and private sector, so that there is a sort of understanding of what is maybe some principles that should be applied in terms of so to enable digital to bring the good commons, the good part, and be paying attention to the harmful and sometimes dark side of this technology. So we highlighted this also very much in this forum, the ethical aspects linked to many of these technologies, including AI. And of course, we have been speaking also about the UNESCO multi-stakeholder consultation, which is going on also at the WSIS forum on the principle for regulation of internet platforms that we are conducting this year, in ahead of course, in the processes that are happening at UN level, like a Global Digital Compact.
Yes, thank you very much, David. And one thing that we really enjoyed was the alignment with the Decade of Indigenous Languages. We worked together for Action Line C8 to have a hackathon and to have several workshops to highlight that we are also connecting with these UN processes which are ongoing. So thank you so much for this great collaboration, David. And now I'd like to move on to Mr. Bilal Jamousi. So Bilal, you are primarily bringing in the angle of standardization and bridging the standardization gap. So how does bridging the standardization gap help us bridge the digital divide?
Great question. Thank you, Gitanjali. So unequal access to technologies and low digital literacy skills are among the biggest contributors to digital divide. And this influences and impacts the ability of developing countries to access and influence international standards making processes. And this is why the ITU came up with the Bridging the Standardization Gap program to foster the participation of developing countries in the standards making process, but also help developing countries in the implementation of international standards across the sectors.
Thank you very much, Bilal. It remains an important component of the Geneva Plan of Action and the WSIS outcome documents. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to move on to Esperanza, who's representing the Partnership on Measuring ICT for Development. Of course, Esperanza, we heard in most of the session the importance of data and importance of having the correct data for analysis and for being able to plan the future activities. So what has the partnership been doing regarding this? It's a partnership of several UN agencies, correct? Please.
So the partnership with 14 international and regional organizations has been working to improve data availability and quality in developing countries. So far, much progress has been done, but we are not yet there. There's still a large number of countries where data gap exists. And so therefore, there was a call for more efforts in improving data availability, more resources in helping countries build capacity in producing those data, as well as looking into sources that will provide more timely and real-time statistics, including the use of big data. And that has been an area where ITU, for example, has been doing a lot of work in the area of using, for example, mobile phone big data to complement and supplement existing traditional data sources to produce data that could estimate, for example, the number of internet users in a country. And that is the hope of the partnership, that we will be able to explore these new data sources to complement and help other agencies provide or produce the data that they need for policy making. Thank you.
Thank you very much, SP. We always need the correct and good data to be able to implement our WSIS action lines. And of course, data also indicator of what more we have to do to ensure that we can use the WSIS action lines for helping to accelerate the achievement of the SDGs. Thank you so much. We have with us Mr. Yaroslav Ponder. So at the regional level, the WSIS action lines are implemented by the regional commissions in coordination with the regional offices of the UN system. So Yaroslav, what are your key takeaways and impressions from the region of Europe? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Gitanjali. In Europe and Central Asia, and I will talk about both regions, because for the implementation of the WSIS, we have created with the other UN agencies, over 30 UN agencies, the so-called United Nations Digital Transformation Group for Europe and Central Asia, in order to mainstream the outcomes of the WSIS and to make sure that we are aligning the WSIS with the SDGs expectations. Making sure also that we are identifying the policy areas which have to be rolled out at the national level, and supporting the UN country teams in implementing and translating the political vision into the action. And this is the beauty of the WSIS, that in fact we are able to make sure that what we are debating this week at the global level with grassroots stakeholders, with all stakeholders coming from the different regions, but also from the different origins, being the private sector, academia, that all this we can then transmit and transpose into the bankable projects at the country level, where the one UN acts for the digital development. This is the reason why also this week the UN group launched the UN Digital Transformation Toolbox to equip the UN country teams with the necessary tools, policies, frameworks, which can help them to form the partnerships and to advance digital development at the country level. So this year we had really very good participation from Europe and Central Asia. We had a lot of cases from Moldova, Ukraine, from Georgia, from Albania. Amazing development in terms of the identifications of the real needs, where not only UN itself can act, but also UN can forge the partnerships in engaging the private sector in our joint vision of advancing the SDGs thanks to the digital.
Thank you, Yaroslav. Of course, at the heart of the WSIS process since its inception is the multi-stakeholder spirit. And this is what I believe you have displayed. And Slovenia, the chairperson of the WSIS Forum, has highlighted this in their workshop that they led, the Slovenian country workshop. There were presence of so many European countries at the WSIS Forum, led by our chairwoman, Minister from Slovenia. So thank you very much. I would like to do a very quick round, just identifying concrete examples, one or two examples in your respective area of work. So let's start with e-business.
Thank you, Gitanjali. I'd like to share one example that was present here at the WSIS this year. So we had a session on women in e-business, and we invited several women who are somehow change makers, already trailblazers, who have succeeded in the digital economy and came to share their experience and show that it is possible. So, for instance, we heard from Lenise Eng. She is the advocate of the E-Trade for Women initiative in Southeast Asia. And she told us how, with her company, Dropi, she's providing a platform for moms and pop stores to digitalize, to buy online, manage their inventories. And she has helped digitize over 100,000 small businesses across her country in Malaysia. So this is an example I would like to share with you, and hopefully it will inspire others.
Yes, of course, so many role models all over the world. So thank you for bringing them here and for sharing them with the entire world. Thank you. Preetam, some concrete examples for C5.
Thank you, Gitanjali. I'll highlight one, which has to do with the opportunities and challenges that emerging technologies bring. So just in December last year, ITU set up a group on the metaverse. Because obviously we know that it can positively impact all 17 SDGs, but the risks are also quite obvious and are being studied. So in December, ITU set up a group. The group is open to all stakeholders, member states, private sectors, civil society, the technical community, the academic community. Everyone can engage in it. And it's looking at various aspects, different layers, the infrastructure layer, the application layer. It's studying which layer to focus on, of course. And the first meeting of the group was in Riyadh just a couple of weeks ago, and more than 600 stakeholders participated in it. It's housed in our ITU standardization sector, ITUT, and we would welcome all stakeholders to participate.
Thank you, Preetam. Davide, of course, you need a whole day to summarize the different activities, but some concrete examples that really stayed with you and have formed an impression.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the one example that I would mention is the work we've done in this forum for the consultation, multi-stakeholder consultation on the implementation of what we call the Rome X indicators for internet universality. Where Rome stands for human rights-based, open, accessible, and multi-stakeholder. Exactly. So this forum is really the place where to discuss this and where to engage, to do this kind of assessment for ensuring that the internet is a place for accessibility and for human right. Is important to bring exactly everybody on the table, the technical community, yes, of course, the governmental actors, yes, but also the civil society and everybody. So a country cannot do an assessment of this kind without, engaging the whole community. So I think that was I think a fantastic discussion that happened in this forum. So I think it's a good example. This will enable UNESCO also to work on the refinement of the indicators that are part of this assessment, maybe simplifying some of them, and engage more with the whole community in the countries where this assessment has been rolling out, which is, by the way, 44 countries at the moment. So.
Thank you very much, Davide. Bilal, for some concrete examples.
Sure. So the BSG program, as I mentioned, has two tracks. One is the capacity for developing countries to influence and participate in the standards making process, and the other is the ability to implement the international standards. So I'll give examples in both tracks. The first one, we have perhaps three elements. One is an online free course on the ITU Academy. on the process for standards development, and we encourage everyone interested to take that online course. The second is hands-on training that we do along with our study group meetings and regional group meetings. And the third is that we have many regional group meetings of our study groups in the region, in the language of the region, which lowers the barrier of access from a linguistic perspective, as well as from geographic perspective, because it's closer to the developing countries. And these, the combination of these will enhance significantly the ability of developing countries to participate in standards making. On the implementation side, we have some examples of, in the financial inclusion, for example, we have key standards on the security aspects of digital financial services. And we have a lab in place to not only raise the capacity of the telecom and the central bank regulator, but also be able to audit the security solutions. And another example in terms of the implementation in the space of smart sustainable cities, where we have key performance indicators that are agreed by 18 UN agencies under the umbrella of United for Smart Sustainable Cities. And we have implemented that in 200 cities around the world, developed and developing. And that's another example, concrete example of trying to help countries implement these standards.
Thank you, Bilal. Indeed, we did see a glimpse of localization and smart cities in the mayor's track at the WSIS forum. So we have more and more mayors joining the process. It's a new community, but it's a very important community because engagement of local communities is extremely important for the implementation of the action lines. Thank you very much. Esperanza, something that the steering committee of partnerships has been implementing.
Yes, I mentioned earlier the challenge of unavailability of timely and reliable data. So the ITU as a lead in the steering committee has been also working in a group in the UN Committee of Experts on Big Data and Data Science. And we are leading, the ITU is leading a task team on the use of mobile phone big data for official statistics. And so in this group, and this is our contribution also to the partnership in terms of improving one of the SDG indicators, which is the percentage of the population using the internet. We have been exploring ways in terms of using mobile phone big data, and this case that we implemented in Brazil and in Indonesia has been very successful, where the different stakeholders are working together and using the UN agreed methodology in terms of using mobile phone big data for official statistics. And so in this project, we were able to test the methodologies, and the National Statistics Office of both Indonesia and Brazil are able to produce data that are coming from mobile phone data sources. And these results are very convincing because they are as close as possible to the results of the household surveys. So in this project, we concluded that mobile phone big data could be used, but we have to address and work with many stakeholders to ensure that data access issues could be addressed and solved in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, SP. Yaroslav, what are some of the concrete examples from Europe?
Yes, thank you very much. This year we are very happy with the meeting which we organized, because it was really the demonstration how the Europe and Central Asia works, being facilitated by the UN. We had in the discussion not only the receiving countries with the UN presence, but also those who are interested to see how they can help. So the presence of the Greece, Slovenia, UK, and many others, it was a real demonstration that the digital development is really the issue of the whole community, and digital doesn't have the frontiers. And talking about the concrete example is the publication which we are co-creating with the all UN country, UN members, called Digital Development Country Profiles, which we launched this week for the Bosnia and Herzegovina, where together with the other UN partners we identified clear advancements of the digitalization in Bosnia, but also identified the areas where the intervention would be useful. And based on this, based on the discussions at the workshop, we were able immediately to follow up on the discussion on the concrete actions which will be transformed into the bankable projects and matched with the interested parties which are interested to help there where the help is the most needed. So we're really creating the value chain which ensures the proper impact for development, and we will continue doing so in the future.
Thank you very much, Yaroslav. So as we heard, WSIS has several pieces and components. It's the UN Regional Commission's UN group, regional inputs, different action lines which are implemented by several UN agencies, ITU, UNESCO, UNCTAD, FAO, WHO. There's so many of them. More than 32 UN agencies working with us. The United Nations Group on Information Society, which ensures that the UN stands as a ready framework for digital cooperation, the standardization gaps, the partnership on measuring ICT for development. So thank you very much for joining us live from Geneva, and we look forward to welcoming you all in WSIS Forum 2024. Thank you.